Well, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We are here today for our webinar talking to the Texas Real Estate Commission about hot topics for all Texas realtors. So welcome to our webinar. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Chelsea, for agreeing to join in today. We appreciate you guys.
Well, likewise, Melissa.
Always glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. All right. Well, so everybody, as we're getting started, for those of you who are tuning in and joining us, I am Melissa Haley with Agent Advantage Coaching and Training. And like I said, today we're going to talk about hot topics for real estate agents. Chelsea is our executive director at the Texas Real Estate Commission. Chelsea, do you have anything you'd like to just say as a quick introduction or bio about yourself before I introduce Scott?
Only that I did not grow up in the real estate world. I was telling someone yesterday that my credentials when I arrived was that I had bought and sold a few houses. So I have learned as I on the job and surrounded myself with people who are in the real estate world. And one of my favorite ways of learning is to participate in things like this, because the questions that we get from the people who do the real work inform how we do our jobs. So thank you for being a part of this and for being active in our conversation.
I love that. Well, thanks. Awesome. All right. And then we're also joined by Scott Kessner. He is our chair of the Texas Real Estate Commission and also a broker and has really just done a lot of great things for the real estate space. So Scott, anything that you'd like to say real quick before we get started?
No, I mean, thanks for inviting us. I think the outreach TREC can have with the licensees and the members of the association is very important. I will tell you, we are very fortunate to have Chelsea in the position we have her in, and we're very fortunate to have the other 8 commissioners we have. You will listen to the commission meeting, and sometimes there's a lot of discussion, and a lot of things are vetted, and I'm just very fortunate to have every seat covered the way we have it covered. We have not only geographical coverage with brokers, but we have large brokers, small brokers, public members with different backgrounds. So it's really a fun time to be chairman of TREC. It really is.
Love that. I love it. Well, we have our work cut out for us down there in Austin now, don't we, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you guys both again so much for taking time. I know you are both very, very busy, and I appreciate you being here to help the folks that are listening really just kind of have that connection to what's happening and how that impacts their business. So since we have a lot to cover, I'm just going to jump right in and get us started. And one of the biggest topics that I think real estate professionals have right this moment, as I'm talking to realtors, as I'm teaching, as I'm, just talking to other fellow professionals, the biggest thing that they have is they're talking about this as settlement by the National Association of Realtors. Now, we know that this only affects licensees who are members of that particular organization, but we also know that many of the license holders in Texas are, in fact, realtors. So I think it's important to just note that this proposed settlement doesn't affect all license holders, but it does affect a lot of them. So with that in mind, can you just elaborate on how TREC fits into this topic? And Scott, if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of start with you, if that's okay.
Okay, well, I'm probably going to throw it to the attorney on the broadcast. And probably, I'm glad you made the differential between licensees and members of the association. Even though 86% of our licensees are members, not everybody is. And so I'm glad you made that difference. And I'm going to throw it back to Chelsea for the legal perspective and the perspective TREC is at.
Yeah, okay.
And we could spend a whole hour on the settlement agreement. I was with a group yesterday and I said, well, has there been a settlement agreement? Is that like something, is that a big deal to people? Kidding, of course. This is an interesting time for the real estate industry, and it's an interesting time for TREC. TREC is not a party to this litigation, of course. This is litigation that is in, the process of being settled. And so we are in kind of a passive seat in this process, but it greatly affects many of the people that we regulate, and we understand that. And so we want to be responsive to that. A few things. We take our direction from the Texas legislature. We are an executive branch agency, meaning that our governing body is a governing body appointed by the governor, and we take our direction from him. And we regulate what the legislature tells us to regulate. So we don't get to just decide to change the way we regulate or to change who we regulate or what exactly. And so I think this next legislative session, of course, the Texas legislature meets every other spring. So this coming spring, they will meet again. And it wouldn't surprise me if they make some changes to how we regulate based on this settlement, because it's of interest of our license holders. But the one way, very narrow way in which we regulate compensation at this point is simply that to say that the broker is the one that gets paid. That's what the law says that we must enforce related to compensation in the real estate industry. That's it. So that's really not changing in this lawsuit, but we want to be supportive in the process. How we are affected. Some of our forms talk about compensation, about MLS, about how those two things interact. And so there will need to be some changes to our forms. Well, who makes changes to our forms? The broker lawyer committee, of which Melissa very much participates in. They are knee deep in their work to determine what needs to change in our TREC forms. And I'll let Scott talk a little bit about the difference between TREC and TR forms, but I want to say one more thing, and that is that we are the government, right? We are a regulatory agency that is part of government. And what do people say about government? Slow as government, right? And that is often seen as a negative thing, but I will tell you that that is very intentional. Government is slow so that we can be inclusive and we can be transparent and thoughtful. I think we can all think of ways in which if government made decisions swiftly, that feels a little bit tenuous or dangerous. And so our slow nature is not because we are lazy. It is because of kind of the thoughtful and drawn out process of making changes. That can be particularly frustrating in this instance where it's really hard to see, how the dust will settle. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very thankful for the relationship between our agency and Texas Realtors. Texas Realtors works only for their members, and they don't need to be slow like government. And they have made changes to their forms. And we definitely partner and work together. We will be able to watch how those forms are utilized and see what's working and what's not. And that will inform, ultimately, I think, how the dust settles on the TREC side. So for members, there are some tools in place right now that will be very helpful. And it will come in time for the entire industry, those who are not members of the association. So Scott, what have I messed up on that?
Well, I think you hit it right. TREC forms are developed by TREC. Our main focus, our main reason for existence is to protect the consumer protection. And there's a lot of TREC forms that are mandatory. You have the 1 to 4 family. Then there are some that are voluntary, the MUD disclosure. So all of those we put out because the legislature tells us to put them out. Okay. And it protects the consumer. Yeah. Now, an agent in the field, there's also Texas Realtor forms that add protection to the consumers. And I think all of us realize that. But the process is probably the biggest thing because, Melissa, I timed it. It was 7 hours and 47 minutes at Broker Lawyer last Friday.
It was long.
I really had to get a second stopwatch. It was so long, okay? But when Texas Realtor changes a form, they have a process. Mm-hmm. Well, I had a phone call. They were being launched June 24th, and one of the forms was changed either that Saturday or Sunday before that Monday. TREC, it's 90 days. If we send something up in August, we propose it, it's put out for public comment because we want comments, and we'll talk about comments a little bit later. Then it comes back in November, and if we approve it, then we have to have an effective date of probably like January 1st. So when Texas Realtor, when they do a form, if they need a change, it's done. Yeah. When we send something up, if we miss something, it's 90 days. And that's what's, I mean, there's some, you know, that's what's scary about our process is it is lengthy, but it's lengthy for a purpose because we want consumer comments. We want comments from non-realtors, licensees, title companies. Our public, we had 35 pages of comments or something like that for broker lawyer.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there is a process, but I think it's a good process for TREC because we've got to get it right.
Yeah.
Gotta get
And
it
I
right.
think you both are making this really good point that we're slow, but we're going to get it right when we get it done, partly because we're going to learn from all the other things that are happening.
Exactly. And we're watching the Texas Realtors Forum at TREC, and I said 7 hours and 47 minutes. Even if it was 9 hours, if it needed to be 9 hours, it would have been 9 hours.
Well,
because there was vetting.
yeah. And we're going to have another meeting on Monday that people can watch for Broker Lawyer Committee because we're not done yet. 7 hours wasn't enough.
Part 2.
Part 2. That's exactly right. Exactly. Well, I love it that you kind of talked about the way that it all fits in together, that it's TREC and it's Texas Realtors. And these are 2 different entities with 2 different sets of forms. And we got 2 different timelines. But I think that it's important to get the word out for sure so that folks know we're not just not doing anything. It's just a process.
Exactly.
Right. And in the meantime, we probably won't know how all of this will settle for quite some time. And I think we could go one of 2 ways in terms of kind of an attitude to where we are in the state of the industry. It could be something that's done to each of us and that feels kind of punitive, or we can look for innovation and look for how we're going to be better. I do believe that there's going to be some real interesting changes for good that come out of this. But in the meantime, it's an unsettled season, and that it, personally or professionally, is never fun, but it is definitely refining. And so that refining process, I think, will be a good one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I feel like as we go through the process, everybody's going to learn more. You know what I mean? Like the agents are going to be out there doing their business. And if they are members of the association, they're going to have the opportunity to use those forms. And we're going to see what's working and what's not working and where the holes are to hopefully get those buttoned up before it moves forward and goes out for public comment. And, hopefully through that process, they're going to come out and they're going to come out right and not have to have a lot of changes.
That's right. Should I tell folks kind of about where broker lawyer fits in the whole process?
Sure. I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Kind of help everybody put all the pieces together.
Right. Because, this is part of the slowest government. Apparently that's going to be what I keep saying today. So the Texas Broker Lawyer Committee is one of the advisory committees that the commission uses to inform their work, right? It's statutorily created. It is made up. Y'all are so smart if you can figure this out. It is made up of lawyers appointed by the state bar. And then, of course, brokers appointed by the commission. And then there's one public member appointed by the governor. And so what they do is they make all changes, creating and changing our TREC forms. And when they make recommendations to the commission, they will gather mostly quarterly, but now they're meeting more often to address these issues. They will meet, make recommendations, and send those to the commission for their consideration. And the commission reviews those and decides whether they like them or don't like them. It's just an up or down vote. And if they like them, then they approve them or propose them for public comment. That's when everybody in the world gets an opportunity to submit their opinion on the changes. And, a comment like, I hate this change, is not helpful. It needs to be, I hate this change because, and here's what needs fixing to make it substantive and helpful in nature. If you say, I love these changes, that's fine, because then our work here is done, right? But we appreciate all of those comments. So after the commission votes to propose them, they go out for public comment. That period is about 30 days. And then those comments are collected and reviewed, sent back to the broker lawyer commission or committee for their review. And then they decide what to do with those. Do they need to make changes based on those comments? Sometimes they do. If they're substantive, then you start the whole process again, right? Then they have to repropose everything to go to the commission again for another comment period. If they're non-substantive changes, then they'll send to the commission and say, we recommend you adopt these forms with a few non-substantive changes or with no changes. And then the commission can decide to adopt those changes. Let's say our proposal happens in August, and then the next time the commission sees them again will be at their next meeting in November. Let's say the process is that streamlined. Then in November, they will adopt those form changes. And then you'll see an effective date of maybe sometime in the first of the year. That's the best case scenario. If comments inform additional changes that are substantive, then you start that process over, they'll propose again in November.
Yeah,
So that's
Chelsea,
kind of
let me-
the rhythm. It takes a while.
I agree.
Let me add to that. The comments are very important. Not long ago, we had a form come up with some changes and there was a lot of public comments and we pulled it down. We put a working group together called Unauthorized Practices Law Working Group to kind of study what the comments said. So when we say comments are important, we will certainly listen to them. Every comment is looked at, it's vetted. And if direction needs to change, we've changed it. The unauthorized practice law was probably the most recent one I can think of where we didn't change the form. We just pulled everything down we had and started back over listening to the comments. And now you can comment online. So we have an online comment tool. So you can certainly comment online.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to know that all of the comments get read.
Amen.
And I know that many times we read each one of them line by line for example, on the broker lawyer committee where I'm participating. But this last time, while we all did read them and we kind of summarized kind of in chunks because we had a whole bunch of people that were saying the same thing. But I do think it's important because I know sometimes on the comments, they say things like, nobody's probably going to read this, but, and then they put their comment in and y'all, I think it's important that that they know that we're reading them and that everybody at TREC really, really does listen to the comments. I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, Scott. So thanks for bringing
and there's a bucket. There might be something come up. Well, we're not looking at that form, but we're going to put it back over here. When we bring that form up, we're going to bring it back. And I think maybe the proposed third party is one of those prime examples. There was a change a couple years ago. Put it over here when we've opened up and then bring it back. So even though it's not acted on, it's put over there. So when we do something, when y'all do something, then it's there to add.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a group effort for sure. Yeah. And we need the input. So good stuff. All right. So you feel like we've covered everything on forms, Chelsea, or you have a couple more things you want to reiterate?
Well, I know sometimes people's curiosity gets the best of them on what broker lawyer is doing, like what those recommendations are. So I'm happy to kind of read what happened at last Friday's meeting. But more than anything, I want people to hear that, and I'll read the changes they made. They're pretty simple in nature, but because their work is not done, what they decided is that they would come back this coming Monday, 2:00. You can watch it online if you want to revisit those items and to kind of finish their work. And once that is complete, then we will put an article on our website that recaps that meeting. What did the broker lawyer committee recommend? So I want you to know that if you're just curious and wanting to know kind of what the direction is, that ultimately look for that recap on our website after next Monday's meeting. And that won't be like Monday at 5. It'll take us a couple days because I will tell you that the work of the broker lawyer committee is complicated. But so far, what they decided at their last meeting, which was on Friday, was that they would make a change to paragraph 12A, 1, little b. So 12A, 1, little b. And it will now read, according to their recommendation. The seller shall also pay an amount not to exceed blank dollar amount to be applied to brokerage fees that buyer has agreed to pay and an amount not to exceed $1 amount to be applied to other buyers' expenses. So that's one change. And then additionally, they have decided to add to paragraph 8B a statement that reads, broker fees are not set by law and are negotiable. So those are the two changes that they've made. The TBD is that going to be it? Will there be additional changes? Should there be an addendum that kind of accounts for all of this? Should there be changes to the language after broker information? Those seem to be the two things that are bubbling up right now for consideration. So again, they're meeting July 22nd at 2 p.m. You can watch online or just look for that article recapping it afterwards. But an opportunity to comment on all of this will likely come once it's proposed by the commission, which we're hoping for August.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it that you gave that quick recap, because it's important for folks to know the work's being done. But I also really love the idea that everybody hopefully it's all clicking here as they're listening, is this is just a proposal right now. Don't think this change is happening.
That's
It's
right.
not yet. It's not yet. It's just, it's the first draft of this is what we think we want to do.
That's right. Now, that took 7 hours and how many minutes?
A
40
long time.
There was some other stuff covered. I mean,
We
yeah,
did.
but,
We did
yeah.
cover other things, but we started the meeting with this and we ended the meeting with this, and we had some other stuff we had to get done in the
That's right.
middle for sure.
Well, possibly some addition to the backup addendum that was probably mentioned 2 or 3 years ago,
Mhm.
and probably some stuff to the third party that was mentioned a couple years ago. So, I mean, yeah, it's a, it's a long meeting, but I'm telling you, you learn so much about different views on forms and what's good, what's bad. So, I mean, it's well worth, even if you just turn on the background and pick up bits and pieces of it, it is very educational. It really is.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. Well, hopefully the folks that are listening today are getting the idea that, man, we have a lot happening with the forms. We're different. TREC and Texas Realtors are different. Ours aren't coming out nearly as quick, and we're still working on them, and they can be part of the process. I think those are kind of like the overarching things with regards to forms.
Agree.
Okay, well, so let's shift gears and let's talk about some other stuff, because TREC has other things going on besides the forms, although the forms are super, super important. Some of the things that I do when I'm out talking to agents is because I'm teaching. And one of the things that's in the broker responsibility class right now is talking about broker succession planning. And we've got this group that's kind of talking about some of these things. So with regards to that, we have, these are other priorities TREC has. There's a rule that was been out for public comment recently. What's happening with this broker succession thing?
I am so happy this rule got proposed. Okay. And basically it was proposed when we were in the Las Colinas, Dallas area. By the way, shout out to everybody. We had to stop the meeting to add another ballroom and chairs. There were so many people out there in the process. So thank y'all for attending. But it doesn't happen a lot. I think 4 or 5 times a year or 2-year cycle. But if a broker has a business entity and they pass away, by statute, their listings are terminated, their contracts are, the agents are terminated. They're just in limbo. I mean, there is nothing that can be done. Well, our licensing department has always had a way to work with them to get someone else substituted. Let's say if I was to something happened to me, then we have people lined up to take over our business entity, our corporation. Well, it was always kind of a policy, but it was never a rule. So we really wanted something in policy rule to where you had so many days to substitute another designated broker. And so we're proposed for 14 days and we put it out for comment, and we had a lot of comment. A lot of people really liked it and really thought it was good. And we had some comments about needing 30 days. And the 14 days was done very strategically because we got with staff and said, what would be an adequate number, and 14 will get it done. Someone suggested 30, and I'm a broker. I'm also a realtor. And if I have 30 days, that means I start on day 15 or 16. It's just the way my body is built and my mind works. So I think it's something that it's really going to be beneficial to the people out there with business entities, to their licensees, to their clients and their principals, that TREC is going to work to get you in that designated broker status as soon as possible. But we do have some time to get it done. I'm excited about this rule. Probably 3 or 4 times in the last year, my phone has rang. What do we do? And our staff is just tremendous getting it done. But we just wanted something more than we will work with them. And so that's why we proposed the rule. And thank goodness we have brokers on the commission that understand it. We've had comments that understand it. And I think when I leave next year, this is going to be something we get it passed that I really think, benefited not only the licensees, but the consumer. Because the consumer should not have their agent taken away or their listing taken away. So I'm excited about it, and I'm excited about the comments. And I'm looking forward to August to maybe get this thing adopted. Chelsea, clean me up.
No, that's great. I think this was really an opportunity to put in rule what our practice has always been, which is to give a grace period. So this was an instance where our rule was more stringent than how we actually operated. And that made people nervous because this is the type of thing that you don't need at all until you need it. And when you need it, you desperately need it. So I think this kind of puts people on notice of the process. Hopefully through conversations like this, you kind of file it away for when the unfortunate need arises. But this is a good thing for our license holder community.
Yeah.
And I'd be willing to bet the majority of people, they have a succession person. They know who's going to go in.
Right.
It's just a matter of getting it done. And this enables that. And if you don't have that, maybe this will spur you to get that done, to have someone to take over your designated, broker's responsibility.
And to revisit that regular, because I think what happens most often is that a person is designated and then time passes and then things change. And then is that your actual person when the need arises? So kind of continually revisiting that is certainly a best practice.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, and when something like that happens, because we're talking about a very unfortunate circumstance, the people that are surrounding this whole thing, this is not their first priority.
No.
They got so many other emotions and things going on that if we can just make it easy, I think that's a better way to have it. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Well, good deal. All right. So we got that covered. That was one of the things that I think was a priority that we were working on. I know that there's another priority that's kind of happening, whether we wanted it to be or not, is, there's that little sunset thing, the sunset rules in the state. And I know that last week at the broker lawyer committee, there was a guest in the room that was part of the sunset, commission stuff. So can we talk a little bit about what is the sunset process and what does that mean to TREC? Because we are part of, like you said, we're this government, thing. How does that play into what we do, this government thing?
Sure. Like, what is that? So I'll start with what it can be and then what it is for us right now, which is the most traditional form of a sunset review, which all state agencies go through on a regular basis that's outlined in statute. So approximately every 12 years, unless you have it more often than that, and that's typically a bad thing. Things are not going well. The legislature really reviews you through this Sunset Advisory Commission to determine if an agency should continue to exist or should it be sunset. Now, most often, an agency should continue to exist. Like, yes, Texas wants to continue to license real estate professionals, right? But what it tends to be, practically speaking, is, okay, yes, it needs to continue to exist. What changes need to be made? So you may remember several years ago now, I think it was like 6 to 7 years ago now, TREC went through that process. And what came out of that is need for significant change. We were not providing good customer service. And So that was a very productive sunset review. And we are much better at providing customer service now than we were. I regret that it took a sunset review for that to happen, but we are definitely better than we were because of that review. So that's one of the traditional look and feel of a sunset review. Often, sunset at the direction of the legislature is asked to do some real specific, kind of more surgical reviews for something in particular. And that is what we are going through right now. It's not because we've done anything wrong, nothing terrible is being revealed. It's basically for informational purposes. They call it a special purpose review. So this time but it kind of looks the same in that sunset interviews a bunch of people, they dig for information. It's a very formal process. We go through a couple of hearings where information is shared on what they found, and then they issue a report that might have some recommendations. It might be recommendations for us, it might be recommendations for the legislature, and time will tell. But currently we are going through that review for the very specific and narrow purpose of reviewing all of the legally required disclosures that a seller must provide of their real property. And then any associated forms. So we basically have created a spreadsheet of all of the different types of disclosures that sellers are obligated to provide, both through form or less formally than that. And this is really just to inform the legislature on if changes need to be made to those forms. I think there was opposing views among members of the legislature on that, and so this will inform their conversation. So for us, we're basically providing information and just sharing information with them in order for them to inform their report. Part of that process is to take public comment, and those public comments are currently open right now until the 19th. Is the 19th Friday? Yes. So through the end of this week. So if you have strong opinions on sellers' disclosures of any type, go to our website. One of the articles that we have, I believe it's still sliding on our main screen, is an article that tells you how to comment on that topic. After the public comment period, so Sunset is now kind of evaluating all of these types of disclosures. They're looking at all of the forms. They're getting that public comment that closes on Friday. And then they will issue any type of recommendation. And then that Sunset Commission will hold 2 public meetings. One is to hear on what staff findings, their staff. And then there is a second one that is a decision meeting to adopt any recommendations to the legislature based on those findings and the public comment. So then the legislature convenes in January and they will consider those recommendations. And typically there is what we call a sunset bill. And all of the recommendations of that Sunset has made for any agency kind of goes through one sunset bill. So that's what's happening there. I'm not losing sleep at night over it. It's a lift for the agency. But I'm excited to see what comes of it and to see what types of recommendations they have. And it's another kind of form of refining kind of the legislative directives around sellers' disclosures.
Okay, I think that that's good information, and I think it's important that people know they can make the comments. Like you said, we read all the comments, but I think it's important that that we know that the state that our elected officials are going to be looking at sellers' disclosure next year. That I think is worthy information for anybody who's watching today. Is, you know, hey, what is that going to look like potentially coming back to TREC from the state after they've reviewed everything? Do we need to make changes? So. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add to that, Scott? Because I have a couple of other things that I think are concerns.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's a great example of the difference between a Texas Realtor form and a TREC form. You know, TREC is legislative, and they might come back and mandate some stuff that we need to add to our form. And so, you know, again, kudos to staff. They've been very proactive, getting information, making sure Sunset has everything they need, open it for comments. So again, it's Sunset is a very good process for all agencies. 18 probably wasn't as positive as it could have been, but it was a good process, you know, and good things came from it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think what people may or may not love about Sunset and what I think is important is as a state, not for TREC, but just as the state as a whole, for all of these agencies that we have, we're trying not to be overburdensome with governmental stuff that's not needed anymore. And I mean, I don't know about y'all, but even in my own business, sometimes I'm like, can we review that policy? Because I'm not sure we need to do that anymore. And
Yeah.
we don't probably do that as often as we should. So kudos to Texas for just being on top of that in general.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Well, can I shift gears a little bit and talk about some other concerns that I hear from people when I'm just talking to agents and I'm, maybe in a classroom setting or something? Because one of the things that I think was kind of a big deal, especially even from the TREC side of it, was rental scams were getting quite a little run lately on those. Can we chat about that? Because that's good for information for licensees, but it's good information for the public too about what's happening with these rental scams.
Absolutely. I'll start us and Scott, since this is so much information, should I do the first case and you do the second case?
Okay.
Okay. And if you want me to do a second case, I can do that one too. But rental fraud scams have been particularly prevalent in the Houston area, is what we have seen. Of course, they happen everywhere, but we did do some very targeted media outreach in the Houston area to just make consumers aware of this situation. It can happen anywhere. But the gist of the scam that we have seen a lot of is that there's individuals that are falsifying documents to make it seem that someone who would otherwise be unqualified as a tenant is in fact qualified. So documents would include like credit reports, income history, things of that sort. So there was a case in Houston that that went through our enforcement process that was particularly damning, really, that used where a license holder knowingly submitted lease applications with fake credit reports. And the scheme involved helping unqualified tenants obtain a lease by submitting all of this falsified documentation regarding their income, credit history, prior evictions to property managers or landlords. So also there was this false story included in the applications that would say, like, let me know if my clients will work for you. I have a deposit already and first month rent. I have it in my office already. And will you consider a 2-year lease? They were approved somewhere else, but then that owner decided to sell. Thanks. So it's, kind of breezy sounding, but where they have all the information and like, you don't even have to talk to the potential tenant or do your own digging, right? Lots of misrepresentations. And that was used to kind of distract and discourage the landlord or property manager from doing their own separate review. So TREC investigated this and found that the agent and co-conspirators were engaging in this type of activity for many years. And the activity resulted in administrative penalty that's one of the largest we've seen in a while, $115,000. The big question is, will we see that? Probably not. And the agent's license was, guess, revoked. That's right. There was a co-conspirator's license who was also revoked, and they were assessed a $48,750 administrative penalty, so a little less than half of that. So that was a serious case. It involved the revocation of 2 licenses, and the Houston area is better off because of that, for sure.
Agreed. Yeah. And I used one of those cases as a training not that long ago. And the agents that I talked to, their mouths were just dropping open like, wait, what happened?
Right. But you can kind of see how it happened, where it's like, hey, you kind of talk as friends, agent to agent. Hey, I've got all this. I'll make your job super easy kind of thing. And that's pretty much never a good idea.
Yeah. Well, it harmed the consumer, the landlord or property manager. It harmed the tenant because now they're really not able to get another place to live. I mean, it just is a mess for everybody.
No, it really is. And the second case was very similar, involved, leases with false information, credit scores, work histories, incomes. And in this one, one license was revoked and a $31,000 penalty. The other one, a $26,000 penalty and revoked, and one was prorated suspension. But the broker was also penalized $1,000 on this one. Okay. And I guess, best practices when they call, oh, I've got this credit report. I ran the pet screening, everything good. As a property manager, we have a philosophy, trust and verify. That's great. They do that, but we have our processes also. But something I want to throw in that just popped in my head, Chelsea's admitted the administrator was $115,000. Okay. They probably won't pay that. They cannot get a license back till they pay it. But kind of spinning off that, last session we changed our recovery fund numbers.
Mhm.
They were 50. I'm sorry, they were 50,000, 100,000. Now they're 125,000 per transaction, 250 per licensee. And is that going to cover everything? Absolutely not. But those original numbers, the 50 and the 100,000, they were established in 1992. And that was a long time ago. So, that's something that, again, I'm going to kudos to Texas Realtors for helping get that through the legislature, because it certainly protects the consumer, increasing it from 50 to 125 and from $100 total to 250. So, yeah. And so, and we'll talk about enforcement a little bit later, but something else we're seeing a lot of seller fraud. And I live in El Paso. We have miles and miles of undeveloped property from here to Van Horn, and they call in, I've got 40 acres and I'd like to sell it, and they've got all the documentation. And I know it's not only El Paso, but statewide, the seller fraud, and especially on the land, the raw land. And so we're seeing more and more of that. And we have a policy that if you can't put your boot in the dirt, you probably don't need to list that lot. You just don't. And my talking points got changed to foot, but if you're selling outside in the desert, you should probably have boots on and not heels. Okay. Some of the very basic stuff is, even if they're out of town, Zoom with them. There's just, seller fraud is really probably not as rampant as it probably could be, but it's there. And so I think rental fraud and seller fraud are something there needs to be red flags brought up, and certainly our enforcement's looking at it.
Yeah. And if you're a license holder and you feel like it seems wrong, that's probably wrong. Like, when the hairs on the back of your neck are standing up, it means something.
Agree.
Well, and Scott, I love what you say about the seller's fraud, that you at least require a Zoom. And when you ask for a Zoom, a lot of people run.
Yeah.
And that's good.
They do.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to see your smiling face, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, whoever you are. Right. Yeah. Well, all right. So we got some fraud things. Can we talk about some things that aren't necessarily fraud, but people sometimes get like an ick feeling just a little bit? Not everybody here is a misrepresented player, but can we talk about wholesaling for just a minute? Because, man, every time I talk to the agents about what would you like to ask TREC, wholesalers come up. So can we just talk about how that works and what's TREC's role with regards to that? And
I'll let you start.
Okay, there you go. Chelsea, that makes you first.
So I'll first just define what wholesaling is, because I think sometimes we get that confused with like a flip of a house. You can sell a house, you can buy a house, put lipstick on it and sell it again. That's not wholesaling. That's just selling a house twice, right? Maybe I haven't even said that right. But wholesaling is the process of putting a contract on a property and as a buyer. And then before you close on that piece of property, you sell your contractual interest to that property. So you're selling what you own, which is a contractual interest to the property, but not the property itself, right? So first off, this is basically the assignment of a contract. I have a contract that I've signed. I'm assigning that contract elsewhere. That is a contractual principle that goes far beyond real estate. The assignment of a contract can be for any type of contract. Some are assignable, some aren't. But so one thing to kind of keep in mind involving wholesaling is that it involves a very sound legal principle that is much bigger than the world in which we operate. And so regulating that is a little bit tricky because it's bigger than what we do. We did look at it a couple of years ago. We put out a survey to just kind of get our arms around the issue with the idea of just wanting data. What can we learn about it? And so we put out a survey targeted to sellers, buyers, wholesalers, and then license holders, and even the title community to just collect information. And I'm not sure that we learned anything that we didn't expect to learn. Here's what we learned. License holders say these guys are predatory. And there's probably some of that. I think there are some wholesalers who act predatory. There are others who consider it a business model and do everything right. Sellers and buyers were kind of confused about what it meant. And wholesalers said, we provide a service in this industry that needs to remain intact. Title industry said it really complicates a close, and some even said we won't do it. We just won't close on our property with a wholesale. I don't think the big title companies would have that position, but we did see that in a couple of instances. So what we did not get was firm data on the kind of the volume of predatory nature of this act. And so that makes it very hard to make a significant change in the industry if you can't really prove that it's a problem. Now, none of us are saying that it's always fine. I think it can be a problem, but it's hard to prove. So what we did, there's always been a requirement within our licensing act that requires a wholesaler to reveal to the buyer, the ultimate buyer of the property, the interest that they have to sell, right? So they've had to disclose that interest in writing. What we added last session was a requirement for the wholesaler to disclose the intention to wholesale to the seller. So I want you to think about what that means. That means that a wholesaler would, in offering to a seller, they would have to say, my intention, or as soon as that intention develops, they would have to do this disclosure in writing. My intention is to sell my contractual interest to another buyer at a profit, right? So they would basically show their cards. Well, a seller may be fine with that. They might need to unload a property. And so in that instance, that's fine. But I think there are a lot of other instances where a seller would say, well, hold up, wait a second, that's not really what I signed up for. And they have that right. So wholesalers do not have to be licensed. Many wholesalers are. If they are not licensed, they're still obligated to disclose. And if they do not disclose as required by law, then we can go after them for a unlicensed practice, which has a fine to it. So we don't have like a ton of teeth, but we can go after them. How do we know that it happens? Complaints. We need a complaint to be filed in order to know it exists. That's true with anything. There's no police force here at TREC. So we would count on people like you to do that. But there's room for wholesalers, but we want to make sure that it's not predatory in nature.
Yeah. Scott, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, we go to a meeting called a RELO. It's all the regulatory agencies in the United States and Canada, and we talk about what's going on in the real estate trend in ours. And wholesaling is something that's been on the radar for the last 3 or 4 years. And so, it's not only in Texas, but it's everywhere. And I don't remember the exact details, but Oklahoma passed a law 2 years ago or 3 years ago where the wholesaler could not sell it until he had a deeded interest. Otherwise, they had to close on the property, get a deed, and they found another way to do it. So, so it is something that we're paying attention to. It does get into private property rights as far as signability of contracts and stuff like that. Well, it's really really kind of bizarre is we will do one presentation in one part of Texas and talk about wholesaling and do it in another one, and they have no idea what we're talking about. Like they think it's like a big box store. You know, they have no idea what we're talking about wholesaling. So it really is market driven, but it's something that you know, that hopefully what was changed last year makes a difference, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that it will, because I feel like just overall the conversation that I have with other real estate agents is, it's one thing to tell a buyer, yeah, I'm just selling you my interest. But the predatory part, if there was going to be some, was probably more likely that I didn't disclose to the seller. And that's where the seller was finding harm is, well, I thought you were buying my house. How come 2 days before closing, you're backing out, walking away? Oh, I didn't find an in-use buyer. And the seller's like, I still needed to sell. So hopefully the change in that disclosure will squash some of the drama, right? And make it at least better. To Chelsea's point, make it better.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Well, we only have like 10 more minutes, and I know it's not enough time to talk about it, but y'all want to talk about water rights at all? Water issues. Boy, we got muds and PIDs and well, there's so much. And forms that go along with it.
All the disclosures are there. Some of that will probably change during the sunset review as far as disclosure. So maybe, to be continued. I mean, Chelsea, I want to try to get to enforcement because I think there's some really key stuff they need to know about the enforcement process. But I mean, I think if you don't have something to water, Chelsea, I mean, feel free. But I think it's, see what.
Realtors have a lot to say about what should happen with MUDs and PIDs, and that's a conversation that I think will continue into next legislative session, and it's kind of part of their agenda. We can't speak to kind of how that will all unfold, but I will just explain that we do have a somewhat new TREC form, notice to purchaser of special taxing or assessment district. And kind of, I'll just say where that came from real fast, and then I think we can get to enforcement. But under Texas law from last session, well, not from last session, it's if a seller's property is located in a water district, like a MUD, like a municipal utility district, the seller has to provide a notice that includes all sorts of specific information to the buyer before the execution of that contract. So the language of that notice is provided in our statute, like word for word. So water districts have to make the information in this form available to the public, seemingly online. But there are many who have not done that. And so TREC, through Broker Lawyer Committee, created this form that allows a seller to take it to their MUD, for instance, and ask for that information to be filled out. Now, if the information is available on a form from their specific MUD, they should use that form. But this is kind of a little bit of a gap filler where the MUDs are not doing what they are statutorily obligated to do. That's where I think additional change might come into play. And honestly, that's kind of how this sunset review came into play also, is kind of the moving parts associated with some of that. So you can't use that form for a PID. It's only for a MUD, but it is helpful for license holders to give to their sellers for the completion of that.
If they don't have what they need from the MUD. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Well, that's probably, I think Scott's got some good thoughts on enforcement. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we go there, Scott?
No, not on the water. Chelsea, you want to visit a little bit about enforcement and the process and the SOA and all that fun stuff?
Sure. So I'll start by just saying how we're different from Texas Realtors. Texas Realtors, you can file a code of ethics complaint, right? Through us, you file a complaint for something that's a violation of the license law, right? So those two things are separate. Some, not all, code of ethics through Texas Realtors, complaints can be filed anonymously. None of our complaints can be filed anonymously. We regulate real estate licenses, right? So a TREC complaint is filed against a license holder. anyone can file a complaint. I think within the license holder community, there are many that believe that it had to be a consumer or someone party to a transaction. Not true. It can be anyone. And I just want to say, this is sort of my drumbeat. It might be the drumbeat for my entire life as an executive director. But my hope is that we can create a culture among this license holder community that makes room for complaints against other license holders. So that if we want to raise the bar within this industry, the way that you do that is that you keep accountability among license holders. You don't have to go directly to a complaint. You can come alongside someone and teach them kindly and professionally. You can contact someone's broker and encourage them to pay attention, even do so nicer than that sounded. And then you can file a complaint. And even in the small towns, I have a lot of people saying, oh, this is a small community, I can't do that. They say that even in Houston. But you got to be able to do that. This is an industry of grown-ups, and we need to be able to hold each other accountable. So I encourage you to file complaints where that is necessary in order to let us see what needs enforcing. So the enforcement process, you file a complaint. A respondent, the person for whom the complaint is against, the license holder, has an opportunity to review that and to respond. There's kind of a back and forth that goes on with that. Ultimately, you can kind of settle your case through an agreed order, but you can decide not to do that too. And you can go through a contested case process, which looks a little bit like a trial at the State Office of Administrative Hearings. And what comes out of that trial or SOA decision is a document that then goes to the commission for their review and kind of acceptance. And they have opportunities to make changes to those sanctions and to decide whether or not they want to accept that decision at the SOA level. So it's very important not to contact a commissioner if you have a complaint against you, because they can be the ultimate deciders of that case. But it's a very serious and kind of long drawn out process that is one of our main functions. I say long, it's shorter now than it ever has been. There are years ago when it was 2 or 3 years to go through to close an enforcement case. And I'm proud to say that we worked really hard starting about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago now, to whittle down the timeline it takes. At the time, we were more often a year about. And now we have 96% of our cases are closed within 6 months. The remainder of those cases are often SOA cases that go through the trial process, which extends the timeline. So I'm really proud of the work that's happened in the enforcement department. But I really want to encourage people to file complaints. Sometimes we can't do much with a complaint. We don't have the evidence, it looks bad, but we don't have enough. We have to dismiss that. Often it's not our jurisdiction. It's something that we don't regulate. Sometimes you can send that to Texas Realtors. Sometimes it's just that someone's pretty rotten, but rotten in a way that we don't regulate. And that doesn't feel very good. But the last thing I'll say is that we can't really use it to inform much of the way we educate our license holders, because this is an interesting statistic. Only about 1% of our license holders have complaints against them. So it's a real narrow collection of people, but we process about 7,000 cases each year. So a lot of those cases aren't specific to the behavior of a license holder. Some of them relate to criminal history or kind of the process of an application, considering an application of one who has criminal history. But a lot of those are kind of the behavior of license holders. Scott, have I messed anything up?
No, I think you hit it perfect. The thing our enforcement does is we get agreed orders every day, and sometimes I'll get an agreed order and I'll email Chelsea, say, whoa, could we have maybe be a little stricter on this one or whatever. Well, every time we do something, if we don't have our ducks in a row and our evidence, it goes to SOA, and SOA just undoes it. And we had one not long ago that we did not have the evidence we probably needed. And then the next complaint, they did have the evidence they needed and got a revocation. And so our enforcement, they need to enforce it. At the same time, if you've heard some of the commission meetings, some of the SOA things are not quite what you understand. So, but I mean, we added 6 people to enforcement, I guess, 2 years ago, and I think it certainly made a difference.
It sounds like it made a
Absolutely.
difference from 2 years to 6 months to get through the process. That's huge.
Yeah, it makes it easier for, there's a lot of good people who have a complaint filed against them, and it takes a while to kind of be exonerated in time, but it happens, and it is okay. One last thing I want to mention in the enforcement process, sometimes we hear from people like, there's just no consistency in how you apply discipline to people. And that's really because of what Scott was just saying, that we put like a prosecutorial hat on. We have to. And we have to look and see whether or not we have the evidence to do what we feel needs doing. Sometimes we feel like somebody needs discipline significantly, but the evidence doesn't show it. Next time it will. So it's inherently inconsistent because it's so fact specific. There's no 2 cases that look exactly alike. And we must consider what we have before us. And that's it. We can't consider the character of someone. We can't, it has to be based in facts and evidence.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we've added the people, because I think as a license holder who might be thinking, wow, this probably should have been a complaint. We probably have license holders who are like, I'm not even doing it because it's gonna be like 2 years before it's even done. And if they know, well, man, we could actually get through the process in a much more timely fashion, that might make them feel more comfortable. If they didn't get what they needed with the agent or with their broker, to your point, that's the best place to start, right? Is
Great.
sometimes it's just training and they just didn't know any better. And, but I love the fact that we've made that much progress. That's huge.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Kudos to y'all for doing it. All right. Well, we're running up against our time. Anything else that you need to cover, Scott, that you want to talk about before we get out of here today?
No, I mean, we have a new website coming up, probably the fall of 25, something like that.
Maybe, but maybe sooner. So we have a kind of a back-end new database that's coming that will help our license holders do more from a self-service standpoint on our website. Should be able to let you see your CE status before you're within your 90-day renewal period. Just will allow for more information, and we just won't be as clunky. So hopefully that means you don't have to call us to ask. We'll still be answering the phones, but I don't want you to have to call. Same way I don't want to call anybody. I don't want to be in a phone tree, and I don't want you to have to be either. So it should be real helpful on all accounts. I expected it to roll out within the next few months. I'm now expecting it kind of spring-ish. As soon as I have an actual date, I will promise it to the world, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Well, it's good news though. We love it when we're making good progress on the technology side.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Any last things you have, Chelsea? Scott said he had the website. Any last ones? Because I know we're hitting our.
No, thanks for your time today. I hope each of you has a great rest of your day. Thanks for spending a little part of your late morning and lunch hour with us.
Absolutely. And thanks to you guys for taking time out of your day to be here. Thanks to everybody who joined us today, who's watching this. Hopefully you got some really great information and you can be better prepared when you go out and do your business in the real estate space. So thanks everybody for being here. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Chelsea. We can see you at the next one.
Thanks, Gabby and Summer, for posting all those links.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks to the folks in the backside for sure for getting all that done. You know what? And I'm going to just throw this little screen share on here. I probably should have done this a second ago. Thanks for joining. These are all the folks that were there. If you need to reach out to any of them, it has on the bottom of the page here at TREC Commission. And I'm just going to go ahead and give a shout out and say they ought to be following y'all on social media. There's a lot of good stuff out there. So if you're not, follow TREC on social media and get plugged in.
Thanks, Melissa.
All right, y'all have a great afternoon. Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.